Today on the podcast, I'm bringing you some breaking news from AI and regulation, and that is that the United States President Joe Biden has just issued an executive order to set a bunch of standards for AI safety and security. I think the big story here is that all of this AI hype really has sparked a lot of excitement and fear as the government pushes for greater guardrails around this. So today on the podcast, I'm diving into all of that. Before I get into that, what I really wanted to tell you about that I'm super excited about is that today is the official launch of the AI Box crowdfunding campaign on Republic.com. So if you followed the podcast for a while, you know that I've been working on a startup called AI Box. This is a no-code, drag-and-drop AI app builder and marketplace. And today we're officially launching the round of crowdfunding. We're doing a crowdfunding round for this. And the thing I wanted to tell you about really quick is that I have a whole podcast episode I'll be releasing shortly that covers all of the details and everything going on in this. But the thing I wanted to mention is that for the first $250,000 invested, I have a discounted valuation. So this is really for you, the listener. We have a $8.5 million valuation for the first $250,000. After that, it'll go up to a $10 million valuation. But I really want to make sure that if you are interested in this space, if you're interested in AI and investing in this, that you're able to get a discounted valuation because you've been around with me from the beginning, and this podcast is really what has made all of this possible. So that's my way of saying thank you. I've worked out a special deal with Republic to be able to do that valuation. You can go over to republic.com/AI-box. I'll leave a link in the show notes as well. So if you're interested, head on over there real quick. We're over $160,000 reserved already, and I don't want you guys to miss out if you're interested. So make sure to go check that out. But let's dive into the rest of the podcast episode. Welcome to the world's #1 AI podcast, AI Chat. I'm your host, Jaden Schaefer. Have you ever wanted to start your own podcast? I record and publish podcasts on a platform called Spotify for Podcasters, and I absolutely love it. Essentially, you can upload from your phone or computer, and it distributes to every platform that plays podcasts. They support video podcasts, and you can make money on the platform with ads or even podcast subscriptions, something that has made my life so much easier as a podcaster. So if you're interested, I highly recommend you give it a try. You can download the Spotify for Podcast app, or go to spotify.com/podcasters to get started on your podcast today. In an effort to establish a more secure foundation for AI technologies, U.S. President Joe Biden has released an executive order mandating AI developers to notify the federal government and present results of all safety tests before a public launch. I think right now we're seeing, of course, like the rapid surge in AI. ChatGPT has obviously propelled this a lot, but it has prompted international discussion about the need for checks and balances in algorithm-driven systems. I think in a previous meeting in May, a bunch of G7 leaders kind of pinpointed their primary areas of concern. And I think today the G7 nations have come to a consensus on some core guiding principles and introduced a quote-unquote voluntary code of conduct aimed at AI developers. So while they have done this, I think the global community is also kind of turning its focus on AI governance. The United Nations unveiled a new kind of board last week to go into this matter. The UK is gearing up for a worldwide summit on AI governance. And I think this is happening at Bletchley Park, where they have Kamala Harris is scheduled to address the attendees there. The US has received some criticism in this regard. Kamala Harris was named as kind of the head of AI for the United States. Of course, she has no background in this area, so there was criticism there. But the Biden-Harris administration has also prioritized AI safety, collecting essentially they got voluntary commitments from a bunch of major AI players: OpenAI, Google, Microsoft, Meta, Amazon. And I think this is kind of that effort there that they put forth was kind of seen as kind of like the precursor to the current executive order they've just launched. So like you have to give them some credit that they are definitely thinking about this. They're definitely talking about this. They're pushing forward the conversation in this space. They do have, of course, criticism about credibility in this space. Obviously, Kamala Harris isn't leading, I would hope, all of the legislation around this. I'm sure they have experts in there, but, it just wasn't great optics to kind of name her instead of someone that's more, that has a lot more experience in this area. But that aside, give them credit for, pushing the conversation forward in this direction. The executive order says essentially that, quote, most powerful AI systems, so that's who they're addressing, developers must disclose their safety test results to the US government. When they say most powerful AI systems, what they're really talking about is Google, Microsoft, Meta, Amazon. Interesting. It's hard to determine exactly like what classifies, right? A new startup comes out with something more powerful than OpenAI, for example's ChatGPT. Would they get lumped in with that? How would we know they're the most powerful AI system? There's a lot of small startups. I think they're trying not to step on their toes and stifle those startups. If it gets to a point where that happens, then it would appear that, OpenAI would have received a regulatory moat because they can kind of shut down smaller startups that might be able to threaten them. There's all of those concerns. The executive order essentially aims to, quote unquote, protect Americans from the potential risks of AI systems. And I think by linking the AI safety guidelines to the Defense Production Act of 1950, essentially they're trying to address any foundation model that could jeopardize national security, economic stability, or public health. Again, really hard to say exactly what that would look like, what those are. So that is definitely something that is going to get litigated and discussed in the future. The order's reach, I think, doesn't really end there. There's plans in place to have a new mechanism to certify AI's safety. So the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, has been assigned the role of creating standards for comprehensive red teaming tests prior to any AI product release. And, it's interesting. We're seeing, of course, OpenAI launched a big, huge red team testing department earlier this year. And I know that OpenAI has been consulted in kind of discussions around all of this. So I wonder if they were, essentially knew this was coming down the pipe and were doing that proactively ahead of time for this particular piece of executive order. So despite, I think, its breadth, a lot of critics suggested that the order might actually lack the necessary enforcement power. So while it underscores areas like equity and civil rights and highlights the risks of AI in sectors like healthcare, justice, and housing, a lot of the executive order kind of leans on recommendations and best practices rather than enforcing a specific mandate. So they say like, hey, you guys should do X, Y, and Z. This is best practice, but they're not exactly giving straight out rules. So it has gotten some criticism for that. I think the big issue of data privacy is acknowledged, especially as AI facilitates, large scale extraction of personal data. The executive order calls on Congress to enact, quote, bipartisan data privacy legislation, essentially to safeguard American citizens' information, right? That makes sense. Europe is on the verge of enacting a comprehensive AI regulation. And I think that is really kind of signaling a global move to manage the potential upheaval that AI possibly could bring. That's what they're saying. And this is, in my opinion, the impact of AI really is kind of reminiscent of the Industrial Revolution. There are some major shifts and changes that we're going to go through in the next 5 years. I think whether President Biden's executive order is going to effectively regulate AI giants like OpenAI, Google, Microsoft, and Meta is still to be told. But I mean, I do think it's promising that they are looking at this. They are, taking steps in this direction. Of course, there's concerns about like over-regulating too soon, stifling innovation. But, I've heard a lot of arguments for regulation as well, where people are saying, when there is regulation, people know what they can and can't do, and putting down those clear lines sometimes helps spur innovation because people will invest in areas where they're like, oh, look, there's regulation saying you can do this. I'll put money in, and it, spurs innovation. So there's arguments on both sides of that. But I think it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out and what impact this has in the future.
This episode is brought to you by Klaviyo, the platform that powers smarter digital relationships. With Klaviyo, you can activate all your customer data in real time, connect seamlessly with your customers across all channels, guide your marketing strategy with AI-powered insights, recommendations, and automated assistance, deliver experiences that feel individually designed at scale, and grow your business faster. Power smarter digital relationships with Klaviyo. Learn more at klaviyo.com/Spotify. That's KLAVIYO.com/Spotify.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. That's the sound of switching your business to Shopify, the global commerce platform that supercharges your selling. Harness the best converting checkout and same intuitive features, trusted apps, and powerful analytics used by the world's leading brands. Stop leaving sales on the table. Discover why millions trust Shopify to build, grow, and run their business. Sign up today for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/tech23.
Thank you for listening to the AI Chat Podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, I'd appreciate it if you rate me wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're looking for an innovative group of AI enthusiasts, make sure you check out our Discord channel and also our Facebook community. It's obviously a lot more interactive than a podcast where we can actually share software tools, prompts that we're using in everyday AI. I'll leave a link for those in the description below.